Good morning and welcome to the Lake George Regional Chamber of Commerce and CVB COVID-19 live update with our elected officials. And special thanks to Mark Shaw of StoredTech for helping us to make this live and available to all of our members throughout the Lake George area. And we're going to start right off the bat with, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who represents New York's 21st Congressional District, which covers the Adirondack Park and beyond. Congresswoman?
Thank you, Gina, and thank you to the Lake George Chamber of Commerce for this opportunity to answer questions from business owners. I thought I would give a brief update and then turn it back over to you, Gina, to hear from our state elected officials and then jump right into questions. So first, I want to thank everyone from the county public health offices to our teachers, to our first responders, to our small businesses that are facing very uncertain times for your effort and for your resilience during this really unprecedented public health crisis. My office has focused on getting out as much information possible from the CDC, from the New York Department of Health, and the county public health offices to make sure people have the most up-to-date guidance that they need. I've also reached out to all of our county and local legislators or supervisors, depending upon which county you're in. But I've touched base with each of the 12 counties in the district. We've been closely in touch with our hospitals as well as our federally qualified health centers and our superintendents to work through, the day-to-day challenges when it comes to providing masks, testing supplies, gowns, and making sure that those requests are into the state and into the federal government as quickly as possible. In addition, we've worked through some very unique northern border issues and needs for this district, given the updated announcement from both U.S. and Canada, the mutual agreement to limit non-essential travel. My priority was making sure that our healthcare providers as well as our important trade partners were still able to cross the border. On top of that, we're doing these calls with chambers of commerce across the district, as I mentioned. We are working tirelessly to deliver relief to small businesses and hardworking families who have lost their jobs or have had to shutter their doors in the case of small businesses, particularly those dependent upon the tourist economy, our small mom and pop hotels, our restaurants that really are the lifeblood of all of our local towns and villages throughout the Adirondacks. We want to make available the small business loans, which will be forgiven for small businesses when it comes to payroll costs. And we want to hear from you because this is so unprecedented. So I understand the significant economic challenges. My focus is on Main Street, not Wall Street, really ensuring that any relief comes to small businesses, particularly in the Adirondacks. So I will turn it back over to you, Gina, to hear from our state elected officials and jump right into questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for being here today. Also joining us is New York State Senator Betty Little, who represents New York's 45th Senate. She may be a little late, but will be joining us. And that district of Senator Little, it includes all or part of Clinton, Essex, Hamilton, Warren, and Washington counties, which most of our members reside in one of those counties. Also joining us is Assemblyman Dan Stec. And Assemblyman Dan Stec represents the 114th District, which comprises Essex and Warren counties and the northern parts of Saratoga and Washington County. Assemblyman Stec, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
All right, so anything you want to say to the group before we get started on our questions?
Hey, Dan, why don't you give a little update from the state level, what you're working on with small businesses?
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can now.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure if I was muted. Well, I can tell you that, as hopefully everyone's been aware, the governor has been on the press conferences every morning, putting out a lot of information, and it's been followed up. The process has been flowing that throughout the day, his team then puts out, an executive order that's captures what he had to say in the morning. And we're fielding a lot of questions, I think, in every legislative district right now, based on what he says in the press conference, and then certainly from the executive orders. But I know that everyone's legislative districts are operating one way or another, either in the district office or remotely. And I think people have been very good about calling in and with suggestions, opportunities for finding the equipment that is necessary, like ventilators. We got a lead on those today, and certainly other protective equipment. But the state legislature should be going back into session soon. We don't know exactly what day yet, but the intent is to get a budget done before or on April 1st, as is the norm. And, so it'll be interesting to get that done. But in the meantime, everyone's trying to just, socially distance ourselves. And we're trying to delay, there's been an announcement, the governor has delayed, the rent payments, and the taxes have also moved to July along with the federal deadline. So we're trying to do those things. And I think the next thing we need to look at is going to be, relief for individuals and businesses, at the state level, similar to what's going on in Washington.
Great. Well, let's start off with one of our first questions for our elected state officials. Do you know of a date or a thought of a date when they might consider gatherings that will be allowed, like weddings, family social gatherings, reunions, and how they plan to do it? Will it be in stages as they did the shutdown, or all at once? In our tourism economy here in the Lake George region, this is a timeline that not only affects the hosts of those events, but our staff and the economy that drives the Lake George area as we move into the season. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's likely to see that it'll be the governor used an analogy of a valve, and he's been shutting down on the valve, and of course Sunday night he shut the valve all the way, but already now he and the president are talking about actions that would start to slowly open that valve again. And they both seem today, in fact, just a few minutes ago, I was listening to the governor's conference call, and it sounds like sooner than later they want to start easing back into some economic normalcy. So for the Lake George region, what that might mean here, that we're March 24th right now, and we're still pre-season, but people are starting to think. I would hope, and I think that there's a good chance that things will start to slacken, loosen up again, and we'll start seeing things reopen, which would be good for our resort and tourism based economy here. So things like weddings and whatnot. I would hope that by mid-spring we'll be back to something that resembles normal.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in here, Gina, from the federal level, because this is being discussed at, the president and the coronavirus task force daily press conferences. We do understand that this is a significant economic burden, but the reason why we are urging individuals to follow the guidance from the CDC in terms of social distancing, not traveling outside of your home unless it's absolutely essential to go to the grocery store, go to the pharmacy, or seek health care, is because we want to get through this as quickly as possible. And the faster we get through this will be based upon how responsive people are today. And I agree with Dan. I am hopeful that we will be able to get back to our amazing events all throughout the Adirondacks in late spring and summer.
Thank you. Another question for our state elected officials. Why didn't New York State publicize that there would be no penalty or interest if sales taxes were not paid on March 20th? There was nothing on the New York State website. The only reference to it was an answer to a question asked to the governor at 11:50 on the 20th. The governor didn't even say anything about this. Any thoughts on that or response?
Well, I hesitate to speak for the governor, and I'm sure he appreciates that. But along those lines, I know that it's like drinking from a fire hose. The questions and information is coming out almost 24/7. So this may not have gotten the call of attention that it should have gotten from the governor and from the press. But I can't speak to why that wasn't publicized more by either the press or the media. But it's important to get it out there now, and I think it's getting out there.
Good, thank you. And also, it would be nice to know exactly what businesses or organizations are still considered essential. I know that that's been a moving target. We all know about our grocery stores, our beer and liquor stores, and our pet stores. But are there construction firms or electricians, plumbers, excavation companies, gun dealers? Is there any update on that?
From the state perspective, those questions are some of the questions that we've been fielding the most because it wasn't very clearly defined initially when they said if you're not essential. Everyone certainly thinks that their job or their passion is essential, and from that perspective, I understand that. But in response to all those questions, the governor's office has put a lot of information on the Empire State Development website, so people can go and look there. And I know that as recently as yesterday, the definitions of what is and isn't essential was still evolving, and so a lot of your small contractors and plumbers and electricians were finding out that yes, indeed, their work is essential. So people should check out the Empire State Development website for that list. And certainly, if they're not finding that information, they want to reach out to my office, Senator Little's office, or any of our legislative offices for help in that regard. We can help piece that together on a case-by-case basis too.
Great, thanks. And we'll make sure that ESD website is on our COVID-19 page here at the Chamber. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. And this, I guess, can be answered by any of you. The only other question that this member wrote in was, how many tests do we have in New York? It would be nice to be able to get tested to confirm if you are carrying it or not, just so that you know to quarantine yourself, even though that can change quickly. Any updates on question?
Sure, I'll take this question. So the availability of testing supplies as well as personal protective equipment, this is a challenge across the country. It is important to note that New York is on the leading edge of this. When we look at the number of tests, New York State has administered more tests than any other state. So nationally, 1/3 of all tests administered are actually in the state of New York. We've been in close touch with the hospitals and county public health offices across the district. We are working to make sure that they have the resources of the testing supplies that they need, particularly for the healthcare workers who we need to keep healthy during this time. What I would recommend based upon the CDC guidance is this is why it's important to stay home. We want to ensure that we're not transmitting this. And just so you know, the number of tests, we're at a 9 out of 10 people who are taking the test actually come back negative. So, we want to make sure that if you feel like you have a cold, that you stay home. Of course, seek care if that progresses, and we are working to get more testing supplies. I believe that the president should, while he signs the Defense Production Act, I believe he should implement that immediately and work with manufacturers to require them to manufacture the needed testing supplies, masks, gowns. But I do want to credit our companies and manufacturers and organizations in this district who are stepping up to meet this call. And we put out information in partnership with the governor's office. Any manufacturer, anyone who has personal protective equipment or has the ability to manufacture ventilators, testing supplies, please reach out. And we've heard from many, many businesses in the district who we are putting in touch with hospitals and county public health offices to address the lack of materials at this time. If you look at the epicenter of the cases, it's really downstate. Saratoga County, we are in double digits of positive tests, and in most of the other counties in my district, it's still in single digits. But we want people to follow CDC guidance, which is social distancing, and really ensure that you're not exposing the most vulnerable, which are seniors, particularly those with pre-existing conditions.
Along the same lines, what is the federal government doing to monitor the effect of COVID-19 on the small businesses?
Really important question. Every month, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics comes out with an employment report with various metrics. We are going to see this for March when that comes out in April. So this will give us a statistical view. But I will tell you, I am taking feedback directly from hundreds and hundreds of small businesses. This is having a significant impact. And if you look at the unemployment numbers in the state of New York, whether it's via phone or via the website, we're almost up to 1 million people. So this is a significant economic hardship, which is why at the federal level, my number one focus is getting relief immediately to small businesses, making that able to be written off so you don't have to pay back the portion of the loan that goes to payroll, and also direct payments to individuals who have lost their jobs, to get them through this bridge, to get them through this difficult time. That's what's being discussed. Hopefully the Senate will get their act together and get it done, and we can pass it out of the House as soon as the Senate votes on it.
So how does that relief differ between corporations and the small businesses?
Sure. So if you are under 500 employees, which the vast majority of employers in my district are, when you apply for an SBA low interest loan, that will be forgiven if you utilize that money for payroll, if you use it for mortgage payments, other debt relief payments. It won't be a loan, it'll be forgiven. For corporations, that's not the case. They have to pay back that plus interest in full. So this is really focused on small businesses, and that's what my priority has been, to ensure that small businesses get the relief and the rescue package they need.
So just to clarify, the government and banks and credit card companies will forgive those loans, mortgages, and debts during this time while people are out of work, kind of like Italy, or is it just that?
If they apply for the SBA loan, so the governor has announced mortgage and other issues at the state level, but at the federal level, for businesses that apply for the SBA loan program provided during coronavirus, if you are under 500 employees, that will be forgiven if it's used for payroll, if it's used for mortgage payments. The idea here is we don't want to see small businesses, getting rid of their workforce at this difficult time. We want to incentivize them to continue paying their workers, and the way to do that is to make that loan, fully forgiven by the federal government. But just to be clear, that's just the SBA program. The state will have, different standards, and I'm not, I defer to the state elected and the governor's office on that.
Congresswoman Stefanik, are there any grants available for small businesses that have no employees that are being hurt by this?
Really good question. This is about the self-employed individuals and the sole proprietors, and we want to make sure that they're also eligible for loan forgiveness as well as small businesses. So the idea is to expand eligibility under both the SBA program, but also the state unemployment insurance. So that includes those who are self-employed and independent contractors we have thousands in this district.
Great. How do you see the interests of the North Country differing in this crisis from the interests of other areas in the country? What are the unique challenges that you see and that you're hearing from everybody who's calling your office? What are some of those solutions?
Sure. So, there are a number of different issues that we face. One is, because we're a rural community, access to broadband is a challenge. That makes it uniquely challenging for example, our teachers to use technology, as we are in this, whole new world right now with online education for our K through 12 programs. If you're a student in Glens Falls or Queensbury, that's very different if you're a student in the rural parts of Washington County or rural parts of Essex County. So that's an issue. That's why we need to continue to expand broadband. And I really credit the teachers in our BOCES programs who are stepping up to meet those needs. Additionally, we have a demographically old district, so making sure that our county offices of the aging have the personnel and the volunteers they need. I've talked to every single county office of the aging across the district, 12 different counties, and they are seeing an influx of requests. That's different from suburban counties where they don't have to drive hundreds of miles every day. In our case in the district, that's hundreds and hundreds of miles daily for people delivering food. Additionally, our rural hospitals in general, prior to this public health crisis, face significant challenges just fiscally in terms of balancing their budget and staying open. That's going to be a lot harder given how expensive this is going to be for rural hospitals. That's why in this legislative bill we're negotiating right now, we are focused on hundreds of billions of dollars of relief specifically for rural hospitals. And I've been in touch with the CEOs of the hospitals across the district on this issue, and they are really stepping up in big ways. In addition, the northern border and our tourist, the importance of tourism in our economy is, that's going to have a significant consequence there as well, as people are not traveling. They are canceling their group events, their weddings, for example, in the spring because of this uncertainty. So that it's going to be uniquely challenging for our locally owned hotels and all of our recreational businesses, all the businesses dependent upon tourism.
So this question is for any of our elected officials. We can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we react. Do you see any way we could create positives out of this situation?
Dan, do you want to take that? I'll do it after you.
Well, yeah, thank you. You know, I mean, it's a lot of attitude and, you know, just mindset that you go into this with. And just, I think it's important for everyone to realize that people around you, especially young people, our kids, are going to take their social cues from how the adults in their lives are reacting to all this. It's very stressful. I mean, I've never taken a psychology course, but, you know, understandably early on, while everyone's rested and this is new, you know, that we're adjusting and everyone's, you know, got a smile on their face. But certainly as time goes on and as the financial impacts become more significant, you know, I think people's patience with each other in the situation is likely to start running thinner. I take great encouragement and comfort in seeing our traditional nonprofits who have a mission in this vein stepping up and amping up their efforts beyond what they normally do. But then even more so to see other businesses, for-profit businesses that are not in this line of work, you know, rolling up their sleeves and saying, what can I do? Whether it's distilleries in the area that are making hand sanitizer or other companies that want to shift over to make personal protective equipment. And these are local examples. And if they're happening here, you know, they're happening across the state and across the country. So I think that, you know, if you're trying to look for a silver lining or, you know, the cup is half full perspective, you know, I think all you have to do is look to those stories right now and see that our neighbors are rolling up their sleeves. And then with that in mind, just understand that, you know what, there's a lot of our neighbors that have really taken a big financial hit here. And some of our neighbors have been ill with this. And I just think if we keep an empathetic kind of mindset and knowing that everyone's going through a rough time and just be good neighbors. And that's what I've seen so far. And, you know, just as long as we can do that before the pressure and the stress gets to it and we start to see it going the other way, which is why I think it's important and it's encouraging that both the governor and the president are starting to talk about and look to try to find a way to pivot so that, you know, they're realizing that in addition to the health issue that we also have a significant economic issue that we can't ignore either.
Yeah, I think the amazing stories that we hear every day, and you read them in the papers and see them on the local news, just people going above and beyond to serve their, you know, their fellow Americans. And as Dan pointed out, many of our local businesses. So yes, you hear about the big businesses like 3M, but in our region, we have companies like Saratoga Flag who are focused on making masks right now. You know, we have volunteers who are sewing masks. I put out an article this morning, Sackett's Harbor, which is on the western side of my district. People over the weekend sewed hundreds and hundreds of masks. The distilleries who are stepping up. There's a manufacturer in the northeastern part of my district that makes caps for hand sanitizer and pill bottles. They are upping their manufacturing output to meet the demand today. So there are amazing stories of heroism. And I think, you know, advice for individuals is, as Dan said, people are going to take their cues from you, and it's important to stay calm and stay vigilant and just make good decisions and look out for your neighbors, especially those who are seniors. FaceTime seniors if you are able to on your iPhone. It's a great way to use technology to stay connected to loved ones who may be feeling really isolated during this time.
Elise, this is Betty.
Oh, go ahead, Betty. You jump in.
Oh, okay. Thank you. First of all, I don't do well with isolation. Number two is, you know, we are so fortunate to have the ability to connect with iPhones, with our computers, with FaceTiming. And I think we need to do that. We need to connect with our neighbors, with our family especially. We need to connect on the spiritual level. There's many, many things that are online, masses and religious organizations that we can watch and participate in. But it's so important. And as Dan had said, neighbor helping neighbors. Really, you can place an order for a grocery thing and have someone pick it up for you. We just have to continue to try to do these things. But and try to be kind and understanding to everyone else and try to keep our chin up.
So what lessons can be learned from this COVID-19 crisis, and how will that inform your future policy-making decisions?
We are going to learn a lot of lessons from this experience. Number one, I think this has really highlighted that our manufacturing and supply chain is overly dependent upon China, and we need to make sure that we have domestic manufacturing capabilities. In addition, making sure that we have a supply at the Department of Defense and the federal government when it comes to our personal protective equipment. I'm working on legislation on both of those issues. And I also think we need to prepare our healthcare system in general for these types of shocks and unanticipated situations, with a particular focus on what the needs are in rural communities from my perspective. I know there's a huge amount of focus again on New York City, but we need to make sure that people that live in rural communities across this country have access.
Well, can you please discuss the latest vote and discussion in the House regarding the stimulus package?
Sure. So we passed phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 was $8.3 billion invested in the CDC, in FDA, in getting a vaccine, in ramping up our testing. Phase 2 included increased funding for the counties. It also included a requirement that testing would be free, whether you are insured under private insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, or uninsured. We want to make sure that testing and I believe additional costs related to coronavirus should be free, and the American people shouldn't have to pay for that out of the pocket. What is currently being debated right now is what is the economic small business relief package. And right now, as of yesterday, this is in the Senate, and Senate Democrats voted against the procedural motion to bring the economic stimulus package to the floor. They are working through that right now. My position on this is we have to stop playing politics and focus on the immediate relief that's needed. This is not a time to add in partisan provisions related to the Green New Deal or related to funding for arts organizations. As much as I believe in funding for arts organizations, we can talk about that afterwards. We need to get immediate relief to the small businesses and workers in this country who need a rescue package now. There was an announcement that in 3 hours they should come to a deal, but it's never really done until it's done in the Senate. Once it passes the Senate, we will be called back to vote on it in the House, and I will be voting in support of any package that provides relief to the American worker and small businesses.
So what do small businesses and their employees need to know about this, like just at that everyman level?
We understand this is unprecedented times, and this is a significant economic challenge for every family across this country, and certainly every family in the North Country. Our priority is getting relief directly to families, and that will be in the form of direct checks. That will be an increased amount depending upon how many children you have. That will also phase out for upper income levels, so that it's going to the people that need it directly to get them through their April 1st bills that are right around the corner. In addition, the small business relief programs, we will be working directly with the chambers across the district to get out that information directly to small businesses. We want you to use these programs. You deserve to have access to these programs. Some businesses have reached out to me and said they're in dire circumstances, but they've never, reached out to the federal government. We are here to help and provide this. It's a rescue package for, people of no fault of their own who are out of jobs right now, or businesses for no fault of their own have had to shutter their doors.
Wow. So what is the best way that everyone can stay informed? What are your go-to sources in the midst of this crisis? And that's for all of you.
You want to take it first, Betty and Dan?
It's really difficult. It's difficult for everyone, but I think what we're doing is finding things to do around the house when I have free time from my phone and all and not working. But time to clean, time to sort through old pictures, old photos. We got out a great big 500-piece puzzle to kind of work on. It had been sitting on a shelf for several years. And I think it's, we're trying to use some takeout food from restaurants. Just drive by and they bring it out to your car. You don't have to, get close to anybody, but try to help these restaurants stay afloat if we can. And, I've found a lot of TED Talks that when you really have nothing else to do, to sit down and listen to some of those that might be of interest. But we're fortunate that we have the technology that they didn't have 50 years ago. And at least I feel we're fortunate to have it. So that's what I'm trying to do.
So in addition to that, in trying to stay healthy, what's your go-to to stay informed?
I would recommend that people continue to rely on the CDC, New York State Department of Health, and county public health officials. In addition, I really look to our health experts during these briefings. I think if you tune in, which I know many, many people are tuning in to the federal briefings and the governor's briefings, I think Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci, who are our nation's top health experts tackling this, they're providing really important information that's helped educate me, and I think it's helping educate millions of Americans on this issue. I do want to kind of ring the alarm bell. Dan and I had a discussion about this a few days ago. There are a lot of rumors floating around there. There is a lot of misinformation online. That's why it's really important to go to the health sites, cdc.gov, coronavirus.gov, or your county public health officials. And then I will tell you, I know a lot of people have the news on 24/7. It's definitely heightening people's concern, but give yourself an hour off the news. Because it can get really, it can drive the anxiety. So it's really important to access the reliable public health experts.
And if I could jump in and agree with that, certainly we've been paying attention to the CDC and Dr. Fauci. I've been in contact with our county public health directors about local issues, and as well as I've reached out to our various hospital CEOs in the area, Adirondack Health and Glens Falls Hospital, and we've been in touch with Hudson Headwaters, just trying to keep a finger on the pulse of what their needs are. But as far as I'm getting it off of the television. I prefer Fox News, but I'm told there are other website or news stations. And but seriously, for this audience too, maybe the business community, the ESD website, Empire State Development website, is excellent. The governor's website is good, and another really good one is the Department of Financial Services. So dfs.ny.gov has a lot of information on that too. So again, that's Department of Financial Services, dfs.ny.gov. We've been using those, and we've been sending people to those out of the office when they call in with questions.
Right.
Thank you.
And our county health departments, really, because some of the stuff you're going to get on it, you're getting what's going on downstate. It's good to connect with our local health departments. They're doing a great job trying to keep everybody informed on their website.
Thank you, and we will ensure that all of those resources that you just enumerated, that we will add those to our COVID-19 page that we have on our website. That's great information. So moving in a different direction, what can the federal government do to help ensure we get the J-1 visa workforce we need to be ready when our tourism season begins?
Really important question, and it's something that I've worked on since I've been in Congress. A few weeks back, the State Department announced they are pausing the J-1 visa program for 60 days and will review this every 30 days. We need to get access to those J-1 visas now, particularly given the challenges we have in general. And I know in terms of J-1 visas, there are so many summer employers that need those, that their workforce depends on them. So we are going to continue pushing the State Department to get this up and running as quickly as possible. Same goes for H-1B. We're trying to increase the cap of H-1B visas as well.
Excellent. This is for all of our elected officials. Are there going to be relief dollars for the tourism industry, specifically in areas like ours?
At the federal level, the relief package will be as flexible and broad as possible. So that means that, again, small businesses are able to apply for this. I think there needs to be a particular focus on getting this information out and making those loans available to the tourism industry, to our hotels, to our restaurants, and our recreational employers, many of whom I've spoken with directly in the district.
Yeah, we really are going to need it because our tourism, other than the hotels and big places, it's small business, and they're really going to be hurting. And even aside from that, some of your barbers and hairdressers and salons and all of that, they're totally shut down, and many of them, their workers don't have huge incomes, don't have a lot in reserve. So all of this, everything is going to need help. The longer it goes on, the worse it becomes.
Right.
And I'll add that my conference, my Assembly Republican Conference, we've got a Small Business Emergency Recovery Act legislation that we put forward. Again, we need to get back to Albany in order to start considering any legislation. But our proposal would direct the state settlement reserve of $890 million towards small business and provide for a 0% interest loan dedicated to small businesses, among other things, repurposing tax credits to help small business. So we've got a package to mind because our small businesses are going to be the ones that are going to take the brunt of this and are least well positioned to survive the longer that this goes on.
Thank you. Along those same lines of payroll, with regard to payroll tax credits for the paid sick leave of 10 to 14 days, who do we contact to get more information, and is this on a case-by-case basis?
Sure. My office shared with Gina the guidance, and we hope that every member at the Lake George Chamber will have access to that. I know she's going to put it on the website and distribute it. It breaks down the new emergency paid leave provisions, which I think are overly confusing, and we need to really push the Department of Labor and the IRS to clarify them with guidance as soon as possible. When they make that guidance available, we will push that out to the chambers, or you can reach out directly to my office if there are specific questions for your business.
And
Okay,
at the state level, similarly, you could always call our office if you've got questions with the paid sick time that we did as one of the two bills that we did last Wednesday in session. But Department of Labor would be another obvious resource to ask questions about the state's new coronavirus-related sick time bill.
Right.
Thank you.
We're done.
Anything more, Senator Little, you wanted to add to that?
Well, just that we're trying to field a lot of questions and try to get answers for people. I know that they're looking for people to ask for these waivers on their business. Especially what's confusing is the sole proprietor, single occupant. Can they continue? The language is actually somewhat confusing in that piece that came out. So having to go through ESD, submit the form, but I know people that have submitted last night that haven't gotten an answer yet. So, everybody is working really hard to help all these businesses, and there's so many questions and just so much unknown. This is certainly unprecedented.
Right. The next question was, there's definitely small business relief for employees, yet what is the true relief for business owners? And I know that you've all addressed this before with regard to the SBA loans, but is there any other thoughts that you have on that from any of you?
I think it's just really important to remember when we talk about SBA loans, this is not a traditional loan. It's essentially the federal government will step up to pay the bills if it's payroll, rent, or utilities, making that portion of the loan 100% forgivable. So this is a bridge to help owners and small businesses get through this difficult time and to, again, try to avoid not meeting payroll.
That's good. Thank you. Following guidance to flatten the curve of the virus to lessen the length of it, is there any indication when we will see the light of day, or what the real immediate liquidity for small business to meet payroll and expenses is really available, and how quickly? Does it go back to that bridge loan, as you're saying?
Yes, it goes back
Yeah.
to the bridge loan. The SBA is going to work to get those out as quickly as possible. What I've said to the Small Business Administration and others in the administration is this can't be full of bureaucratic red tape. This needs to get out immediately as soon as possible, which is why the Senate needs to vote as quickly as possible, and then the House needs to pass it and send it to the president's desk immediately. The goal is these need to get out before, ideally before April. And I know that's a tight turnaround, but that's the type of responsiveness that's needed.
Right. One of the things we're hearing up our way too is that people coming up to their second homes or people coming up and just to get away from the city and the urban areas where they have certainly more of the virus than we are having up here at this point. But how are we going to be protected from that? And I know in some areas they're asking that people, when they come up here, if they will self-quarantine for 7 to 14 days, stay in their second home and, call for help if they need something delivered or something like that. But you can't force them to do it, but we're trying to ask for that. Because, if people come up and everyone starts getting really sick up here, it really will tax our healthcare systems.
Senator Little, that was actually one of the last questions that was just sent in just minutes before this live program. And we noticed that uptick of second homeowners. Do you think this is something that the governor will address shortly to say, just as you're saying, is to self-quarantine or to actually just stay home?
Well, Florida has done it, that anyone coming from New York State should self-quarantine for 14 days. I saw that yesterday, and I thought, well, that's actually what we should be doing and asking people to do when they come up here.
Yeah, because they're already here. They're flocking.
Right. They are, and, taxing the grocery stores and all. And it's not that we don't like them and want them and aren't a big part of our communities, but at this time of year, we're not ready for that.
Right. We're going to switch gears a little. Well, not really switch gears, but go back to the SBA loans, and specifically with regard to nonprofits. Are they eligible for those SBA loans to get through to continue staffing and meet community needs? And yet,
yes.
Is there? Yeah, go ahead.
They are at the state level too.
Yep, at the
Right.
federal and state level, they're both eligible. At the federal level, we're also looking to add provisions to enhance tax deductions for charitable giving because, again, people are stepping up and donating to these local nonprofits, and we want to continue that trend. But, yes, they are eligible for SBA loans.
Great. To you, Congresswoman, when will the federal government release the stockpile of masks, gloves, and other supplies? Is that still an issue? Is that relief already coming?
Yes, the president announced that he has released millions of masks and PPE to the state of New York. Now we're working with the state to make sure that the counties in our district get the resources they need. I did call for the president to invoke the Defense Production Act to ramp up the production of, when I say PPEs, I mean personal protective equipment for our healthcare providers. The president signed it, but he is not directing manufacturers at this point since they are stepping up voluntarily. I think Governor Cuomo's call to the president is the right one, which is we've got to prioritize this and make sure that the production and the number of masks, et cetera, go to the states that need it the most at this time. And that goes for ventilators as well, which we will need quickly here. So again, they are throwing everything they have, and millions of masks are on the way. And there are updates from some of the counties in this district that have received the masks and personal protective equipment this morning in some cases.
Great. Have you heard on the federal level whether is there an anticipation of a national lockdown or an interstate travel ban of any sort? Again,
I think this is where it gets back to some of the misinformation and rumors going on. There is not a national lockdown. We had to make sure that we put out that information because we were getting a lot of questions. If you look at the Secretary of Homeland Security, he has said there's no plans for a national lockdown. We are just trying to make sure people are making smart decisions for the public health and that they heed the advice by CDC, and really take seriously the need for social distancing and don't go out unless it's essential needs. Groceries, pharmacists, healthcare, those are fine. Just be vigilant, stay calm, but there is not a plan for a national lockdown.
Great. Insurance policies that not covering the loss of business because of the health pandemic, are there any discussions to cover this in the future?
Good question. We were working on this for a small business in Warren County earlier today. Insurance is primarily regulated at the state level, so this is something that I'm hoping that our state leaders, including Betty and Dan on the call, are going to look at going forward, but we're going to have to address this.
And they are still operating because they're considered an essential business.
Right. So just to change gears a little bit, how do we handle childcare for parents who still need to work, and what government support is available?
This is really a tough one because I had a call from someone who was a teacher's aide and had to go into the school and left an 8 and 10-year-old home and did not have any childcare for them. So I think it worked out all right because I didn't hear any more, but this is very difficult, and we're talking about, I heard that my son's family moved from Virginia 2 years ago, and the kids are hearing from their classmates in Virginia, they have canceled school till the end of the year. They're not going to go back into the classroom. And all of this is so difficult, and it's difficult on who is home. And even if the parents are trying to work from home, it's difficult to keep the kids busy. And to get them doing schoolwork and all of that. All the college kids that are home are having trouble with internet service in certain areas. They need, if you have DSL and you still don't get a real good internet service or broadband and can't get it, not too many can be on it at once. So, there are thousands of problems being created by all of this, that's for sure.
Senator Little, you bring up a good point about our schools and our school system. And for you, Congresswoman Stefanik, what federal mandate relief can our schools expect to receive?
One that I worked on, and we were happy to have the Secretary of Education, the President, listen to us, is the testing requirements. So as our teachers know very well, and our students and parents, that there are these federal testing mandates. This would be unfair to teachers, students, and parents if they had federal tests this year. So those are being waived nationally. And, that's, I think, important to make sure that our students don't have that burden on top of the already very challenging situation of this distance learning that's happening right now.
There should be a huge financial savings by not having those tests this year. I wonder if that's something that could be tapped into.
We will see. That's a great point. So, Congresswoman Stefanik, you've mentioned Main Street over Wall Street. You've said this in the past, so what's happening to ensure our small business are the first and foremost of this most recent economic package you're working on?
Again, drawing a line in the sand in that if you are under 500 employees, a large aspect of the loan will be forgiven. Again, those utility payments, payroll payments, that will be forgiven. That's not the case for large corporations. Additionally, I don't support these large corporations being able to use federal dollars for stock buybacks. That's something that the president agrees with me on, and we want to make sure that that's tightened up. We do not want to be seeing golden executive parachutes being utilized at this time of crisis. So again, strengthening it and prioritizing small businesses, and those larger businesses that benefit from this package will have to pay back with interest, unlike the small businesses where a big portion of the loans will be forgiven if that's used for payroll and utilities and other expenses.
Thank you. What has been the CDC role to overcome COVID virus? COVID-19 virus. You helped to get the private labs that are now running the tests. What's happening to get the needed medical supplies to continue more testing?
Yeah, CDC has played a really central role in educating the public, putting out up-to-date information, particularly for seniors and employers, on what steps they should take to limit contact and how we can slow the spread. We're in very close contact with our federal agencies, and we did urge them so we could speed up the processing of these tests, allowing New York to designate private labs, which helps those numbers. I mean, that's why you're seeing the increased numbers in New York, is because we are testing faster than other states across the country. You know, CDC also needs to make sure that when it comes to the masks and personal protective equipment, that we are ensuring it goes to the places that are needed, which right now is the state of New York. And I think we are doing that. It was just, looking back, slow of the agency to respond.
But and you mentioned the federal agencies. So has FEMA received the resources that they need to deal with this crisis, in your opinion?
Yes. Good question. FEMA was activated by President Trump once he declared a nationwide public emergency. In addition, I supported the governor's call for a disaster declaration. The New York delegation worked together on a bipartisan basis. That frees up more FEMA resources locally, and the president agreed with that disaster declaration. So we are seeing FEMA resources in New York State right now today.
Thank you. And then we've talked a lot about the tax relief. Where is all this tax relief money truly coming from? For instance, if I don't have a job, I'm furloughed or downsized and not paying taxes, where is this money coming from?
It is important. This is why I think we need to be fiscally responsible to plan for times of crisis like today, when we need immediate relief. So this is taxpayer dollars that we're discussing right now. I believe it is important to provide a rescue package to small businesses and hardworking people across this country. The workers who have no fault of their own are out of a job. But once we are through this crisis, we need to get back to more fiscally responsible spending, because you want to save for future crises. That's important for any household. That's important for the federal government.
Yes, thank you. This was an interesting question. Was this virus intentionally started to hurt the U.S.? What's happening on a national level to understand this?
You know, I don't believe there is evidence that this was done intentionally. What I am very, very concerned about is the Chinese Communist Party was not honest with their own people, the world, and the World Health Organization. And it's now becoming clear that they were lying about this, that they were hiding information, and significant lives have been lost because of that. I've spoken out on that extensively, and I am actually working on a House resolution today that would call on the international community to investigate the Chinese Communist Party, because we need to know if they withheld this information, if they spread misinformation. I'm very concerned that you have leaders of the Chinese government blaming the U.S. Army and spewing that propaganda around the world. There needs to be accountability, because this is not just a pandemic in the United States. This is a global pandemic, and there will be consequences. So I'm leading the charge for a global investigation into China and their failure to be honest with the global community, which has caused lives to be lost.
You know, in wrapping this up and thinking about just this almost an hour that all of you have spent with us today, our members, colleagues, and neighbors really appreciate your consistent, clear, and visible leadership. Are there certain things that everyone should know that you are currently doing to stay out there and in front of all of the information on our behalf?
I can tell you on the local level, all the people that work in my office are able to use their computers at home, and they are connected to the office computers. So they are functioning at home, and we have tried to have one person in the office catching the phones as they come in. Otherwise, if we don't, we go and catch the messages that were left. But doing the best we can to make sure that we're responding to everyone.
And
Thank you.
on our end, And on our end, my district office is still open, but we are not taking in any appointments. We're answering the phones and taking care of emails. If we make the decision or if we end up working remotely, both of my staff members and I are prepared to do that as well from home. But we're trying to keep up with there's a increased volume of traffic, email and phone calls in asking specific questions about this, and it's so fluid that we're just trying to keep up with it all, make sure that we're getting information out, and just making sure that we're answering the mail.
Yes, my office, we are here to serve the constituents of this district, especially in times of crisis. We are working. I'm personally doing hundreds of calls with constituents and small businesses. I participated in many of the county coronavirus task force conference calls. I've participated in calls with our Board of Supervisors or county legislatures across the district, as well as other chambers of commerce. I've personally called all the county offices of the aging. I've also been in touch with the superintendents of the schools. I know Betty and Dan are doing this as well, but I just thought I'd walk through all these pieces. Additionally, at the federal level, we're having numerous senior level calls with Dr. Fauci, with the CDC, as well as cabinet level officials, including Secretary Chad Wolf on the northern border issues. And, you know, again, we are here to take your calls and answer your concerns, and we will continue doing that throughout this crisis.
And if I could add, since I am of that age, 79, believe me, my kids don't even letting me go to the grocery store. So I am totally working at home, but on my phone and computer all day. And as Elise and Dan have said, we're on lots of conference calls, getting more information, listening to what the issues are.
Well, thank you all for that. And I did note that each of you has a website that's easily accessible. You're all active on Twitter and Facebook, on social media platforms for all of our members to access that information. And we will continue to link our COVID-19 webpage specifically to your sites so that we keep our membership and neighbors and colleagues updated as quickly as we can. Thank you all. We've been so fortunate to have today Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Senator Betty Little, Assemblyman Dan Stec join us here for the Lake George Regional Chamber of Commerce COVID-19 live update. We will be sending out this as a follow-up recording to keep all informed to the best of our ability. And thank you again all for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the members of your community, all the business owners and the hardworking families. This is unprecedented. We're going to get through this together. I know it's a significant hardship, but the sooner we get through this, the quicker we can get back to business. Thanks for everything you do at the Chamber.
Thanks, everybody. Hang tough.
Thank you.